What's up, guys? This is Ian here, coach of your Ladner Lantern, bringing you guys the NCL Season 2 draft recap for the Green Bay Golisopods, coached by Matt. This, I believe, should be the fifth episode in the series. Um, Thank you guys so much for checking these episodes out. I do not believe that Matt makes any YouTube content. If he does, I will be sure to get that and um, put him as one of the featured channels in the on the NCL YouTube channel. If you check out our channel, you should see the featured channels on the right hand side, and all of the coaches that produce YouTube content for the league, or any YouTube content in general, are on that sidebar. So, getting right into things, Matt had a middle of the draft pick. I want to say he had fifth pick overall. Let me just quickly check that. Matt had, nope, he didn't. He had sixth pick overall, so he was right in the middle of the draft. And to kick things off, Matt took one of the premier offensive threats from last season that actually got moved up a tier, and he took Mega Sharpedo right off the bat. Mega Sharpedo is fantastic in the NCL. It got proven to be absolutely disgustingly broken last season by Cade, who got like 18 kills with it or something ridiculous. Uh, Sorry, excuse me. It is a massive physical attacker with base 140 attack, and then Strong Jaw on top of that just means moves like Crunch, Ice Fang, Psychic Fangs, all of them are doing ridiculous amounts of damage. And combine that with it getting speed boost in its base form and you not having to Mega Evolve right off the bat, I think is really solid. This is the water type for his Fire Water Grass Core, which is really cool. He picked up a dark type right off the bat, which is also really cool. I love dark types because it's a good ghost resist and a psychic immunity, and also a dark resist itself. Mega Sharpedo is pretty cool. We actually moved it up to tier 1 because of how good it was last season. So he's not going to be gaining any points like Cade was last season, but it's a really big threat, and I'm sure that someone else would have grabbed it if Matt didn't grab it in round 1. Again, really solid pick. I don't know how much there is to really talk about Mega Shark. It's actually a decent special attacker as well. I totally didn't realize it has 110 base special attack, which is really cool. It's sitting at a speed tier above base 100s, which is really good as well. Just being able to outspeed things like Manaphy, things like Victini, things like Mew, and then especially with speed boost, being able to outscarf anything at its speed as well. So Mega Sharpedo, really good pick. Round 2 came around, and I know Nacho wanted this, but Matt ends up grabbing Latios for himself. Levitator, which doesn't really do a whole lot. I think Mega Sharpedo kind of covers a few of Latios' weaknesses, obviously the Dark and the Ghost typings. They both share a weakness to Bug, which I'm hoping he's going to patch up in a sec. Grabbing a Dragon type this early on is really cool too. He's got what's looking like a fast team at the moment with the base 105 and the base 110. Latios is a really good special attacker to combine with Mega Sharpedo's amazing physical attack. Big fan of the Latios pickup. I agree with basically everyone that says this, but Latios is the better of the Lati twins by themselves. I think Mega Latios is better than Mega Latios, but Latios is better than Latios. Um, yeah, pretty good pickup overall. It's a defogger for him, which is reasonably useful. We'll see later, but for Sharpedo especially, you don't want to be taking any residual damage on the Sharpedo, so grabbing a defogger is really cool. Um, Sharpedo is weak to fighting as well, and Latios is a psychic type, so it sort of covers up that weakness there. Latios can also tank any grass hit or electric hit that Sharpedo wants to take, so I think there's a lot of really good synergy between them. And then in round 3, Matt grabbed a very Matt-esque pick with the Skarmory. Matt actually didn't have any of these mons last season, by the way, but this is feeling like a very Matt draft to me. Matt just seems to sort of be able to get a draft that's really good from what I've seen, and that functions really well together, I think. So Skarmory is a really good hazard setter. Sharpedo does need like rocks to kind of secure kills. Skarmory's got rocks, Skarmory's got spikes. It's a sturdy user. It's another electric weakness, and Latios isn't the best electric sponge. It's got reliable recovery for a wall, which is really cool. Great physical wall. Latios is better on the special side. It can tank hits for the Latios and the Sharpedo. Um, Sharpedo and Latios can both tank the fire hits that Skarmory doesn't want to take either. Skarmory is the same typing as Celesteela, which we talked about in Nacho's draft breakdown, and it's only weak to electric and fire, which is really cool. It's got tons of immunities and tons of resists. It's another defogger for him, a little bit slower, which is kind of nice as well for his team. I'm a big fan of sort of how this is synergizing already. And then in round 4, Matt actually grabbed something that was from his team last season and may have been the scariest threat from his team last season. Considering his team had Landorus Therian, I think that's saying something. He grabbed Volcarona again. Volcarona, I should have looked this up before I started recording, but it's had double-digit kills last season. It was in the top 6, I want to say, at the very least, potentially top 5 in kills for last season. Volcarona is a massive special threat, sort of combining with the Latios for the massive special threat. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a lot for his rock weakness for the Volcarona right now, but maybe we'll see that he patches that up later on in the draft. Um, Again, Rock is looking pretty good against his team at the moment. He doesn't really have a resist for Rock. It's weak to flying, which is patched up by the Skarmory potentially. Um, it's not the best tank overall, but it can tank fairy moves for the Sharpedo and the Latios, something the Skarmory also does. So now he's got a Dragon and a Steel and a Fire and a Water. Premier special attackers, really good physical attacker, really good hazard setter. He technically has 3 defoggers at this point. Volcarona does get defog, although you probably won't ever see it run on that because then it has to come in on rocks or you have to predict them setting up rocks to get Volcarona in first. And if you're going to predict them setting up rocks, is it not just better to get Volcarona in and then be able to Quiver Dance? That's kind of just my thought process on that. Heading into round 5, Matt wanted to grab even more removal and more reliable removal, as well as another physical wall, I think. And he ends up grabbing the Donphan, a member from my team last season. It was fantastic on my team last season. It's a great physical attacker. It's some more priority. He has some priority in Mega Sharpedo with the Aqua Jet. He's got a ground type now to soak electric hits for the Skarmory better. It's a sturdy user, it's a rock setter, it's a rapid spinner, it gets ice shard, it gets knockoff, earthquake, rock coverage, play rough, it gets seed bomb. Donphan can be used in a ton of different ways, and in a league where we have very few restrictions on Z moves, it can actually be a really good Z move user as well. It's a little bit on the slower side, just like Skarmory, but he's got a kind of a diverse thing going on with his speed tiers right now, which I like a lot. Potentially Sandvale against the Sand team could be kind of nifty. Yeah, Donphan is a pretty cool mon. Big fan of it myself. I think it functions well on his team. He needed kind of another physical attacker to go along with Mega Sharpedo, and he got that in the Donphan. I'm not sure if people necessarily prep for offensive Donphan, but it can be a decent rock polish user as well. That's just something to look into. His next pick, he ends up finishing off his Dragon Fairy Silcore and grabs probably one of the fattest fairies in draft, and he grabs Florges. Fantastic special wall for him at the moment. He does have a poison switch in Skarmory, a steel switch in Skarmory and Volcarona. So he's got some things that can cover Florges' weaknesses at the moment, and Florges can cover some of the weaknesses like Latios' bug weakness, Latios and Sharpedo's bug weakness, which Skarmory patched up as well, I might add. Skarmory is a 4x resist to bug for both of those. It's also a dark resist for his Latios, which really was only Mega Sharpedo before, and Mega Sharpedo is kind of frail, so you don't really want to use it as a dark resist every single time. Florges is a fantastic special wall. It's a wish passer into things like Volcarona, things like Mega Sharpedo that don't have their own recovery options. Even things like Donphan, so we can heal up a physical wall. Skarmory, you're not necessarily going to wish pass into all the time because it has Roost anyways. It's another defogger, so he has tons of removal options at this point. I think he has 4 defoggers and a spinner just in the first 6 rounds. Maybe lacking a little bit on the hazard side, maybe, but he's got 2 stealth rockers and a spiker already, so we'll sort of see how that plays out. Florges can also be a pretty decent special attacker, calm minds, things like that. Both of its abilities, I think, are pretty much useless, so you'll never really see them coming into play. It's a cleric, it's a heal ball user, so things like Skarmory getting burnt, things like Volcarona getting toxic, Donphan getting burnt, Sharpedo getting burnt, all of those things he can heal off with the heal bell. I think Florges is a really good glue Pokemon for this right now, and his Fairy Dragon Steel Core is looking pretty defensive, but maybe he'll. But he's got a really good offensive Fire Water Grass Core going on right now, so that sort of makes up for it. In round 7, he opts to finish off his Firewater Grass Core and ends up grabbing Decidueye. It's a ghost type, which is really cool, which means he's got a spin blocker now for his spikes. Um, it has the addition of Long Reach, which we actually added in the middle of the season, last season. So he's not going to be hit by things like Rocky Helmet, or Ferrothorn was actually drafted this season, so he's not going to be hit by Iron Barbs potentially. It's a pretty decent mixed attacker. It's a really good special wall, just like Florges is. It's not, sorry, it's not on the level of Florges, but it is a decent specially defensive wall. Grass and Ghost are an okay defensive typing together. Ghost covers up Grass's poison weakness. And I want to say it's bug weakness as well. So Decidueye is looking like it's in a good spot. He's got he still doesn't really have a great fire resist right now. Like it's basically Latios. So we'll sort of look for him to patch that up a little bit later. And yeah, Decidueye is another defogger, so he's got tons of removal options right now. It's a good Nasty Plot user, it's a good Swords Dance user. There's no Z restriction, so he can use Deciduum Z. I know I've seen Spirit Shackle curse sets with Roost, where you curse with a ghost type and it takes away 25% of your opponent's HP each turn, and you've trapped them in there with you, and then you can Roost up. I had this happened to me actually on a Registeel set that I was running, and I got trapped by Decidueye and cursed to death. So that kind of sucked, but there you go. I think it's another, well, it's another pivot option for him. At the moment, he's only got Volcarona and Decidueye as pivot options, and you don't really run U-turn on Volcarona. I may even be talking out of my ass. I'm pretty sure Volcarona gets U-turn. So Decidueye is kind of the start of pivoting for him, if that's what he wants. He had a really good Volturn core last season with Landorus and Rotom Wash together. I think it worked out really well for him, and he was able to pivot into his defensive walls quite a bit. Yeah, so Decidueye, great pick. Round 8, he ends up grabbing his electric type, and it's a ground immunity for his own electric type. So he's not really weak to ground. He's got Decidueye to soak up ground types, and he grabs Electros. Electros is another good mixed attacker. Most of the time you're going to see an Assault Vest slapped on this and maybe like a mixed set of Electros. I know it can be a really good coil sweeper itself. It's kind of slow. It's the same speed tier as Donphan. It doesn't offer too much that his team didn't already have. It's a good knockoff user. It's a good pivot with the Decidueye, so he's got Decidueye and Electros to pivot around with. Pivot into things like Skarmory and Florges as his walls, or even Donphan to set up rocks. I am of the opinion that Electros is on the lower end of electric types personally, just because it doesn't have good recovery options, and it's kind of a more defensive electric type. Like it has to tank a hit to get a hit off, rather than things like Raikou, Jolteon that are fast enough to just be able to volt switch out on things. Um, but he does have Wish Passing and Florges, so he kind of mitigates that a little bit. Um, I'm a fan of using Electros, don't get me wrong. I'm a fan of it, but I don't necessarily know how well it fits his team. His team started off really fast, and now it's looking kind of middling on the speed. So far, Latios is his fastest spawn, and he kind of relies on speed boost for Mega Sharpedo. Potentially, he may need the extra damage with Mega Sharpedo, and will have to Mega Evolve before he can get a speed boost off. There may be something where that comes in. Um, Electros is kind of cool though. And now we're heading into more of the niche picks. He's heading into his tier 4 and tier 5 picks, and so there's a little less to talk about with these. But next up is Wheezing. So he grabs a Toxic Spike user for himself, which is really cool. Another ground immunity. So he's got Latios, Skarmory, Wheezing, and Electros as ground immunities. Unfortunately, 3 of those are levitators, so a Mold Breaker Mon can hit through most of his team with ground. That's not the biggest deal because he's got Decidueye to soak ground hits as well. He's got a good physical wall in Donphan and Skarmory as well. Um, So we'll see sort of how that plays out. Wheezing isn't the greatest poison type, but it's a really good budget poison type down this low in the draft. Again, Toxic Spike user, it's a Will-O-Wisp user as well. It's got a lot of good utility options for it. It's a Haze user, something like Skarmory gets like Whirlwind. We've got a Haze user now. Dunfang gets like Roar and stuff, so he can't really be set up on necessarily either. Wheezing is a good physical wall. I'm not sure how well it'll play into his team right now. He doesn't have a psychic weakness. He does not have a psychic weakness whatsoever. He's got a lot of things to deal with psychic types, which is technically Weezing's only weakness at this point. So I think it's a really good pick for him. Um, I'm a fan of Weezing. I'd love to try it out one day myself. Actually, I think I have it in a league currently, but that's besides the point. His next pick in round 10, he wanted to grab a tier 5, and he grabbed a really good tier 5 in my opinion. I've used this extensively now, and it's pretty decent. He grabbed Girder. Girder Mini Conkeldurr. It doesn't have the stat line that Conkeldurr does, but it can run a Violite, which makes it just as bulky on the physical side, and it has 3 really good abilities. Like I was saying earlier, a lot of his team kind of suffers from getting burnt, and having a status soaker in Girder is really strong to help out with that with Guts. It's more priority with Mach Punch. He's reasonably lacking on priority overall. That's sort of stab, but Mach Punch is super good. You can run the Sheer Force, which just destroys things with things like Ice Punch. Iron Fist boosted Drain Punches and Mach Punches are absolutely ridiculous. Um, yeah, Girders, it's a decent physical wall. It's something that can switch into things relatively well, and it's a really good bulk ups user as well. I'm a big fan of Girder myself. I think Matt chose a really good option in picking up his fighting type as Girder. And then last but not least, Matt ended up going with his ice type. Pretty decent ice type, and he actually grabbed, I think, the premier special walls in the game when he grabbed Regice. Regice has base 200 SPDF going along with Florges' base 154. I think it's a little bit ridiculous how specially defensive his team potentially is, but at the same time, he kind of needed it. Um, excuse me. Regice can be a rock polish sweeper. It's got decent defense and a decent special attack. It can be a decent special attacker. Again, his team's looking kind of slow at this point, to be honest. He just picked up like 5 slow things in a row. No, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, seven slow things in a row. Like his last 7 picks have been under base 100. So his team is maybe a little bit slow, but he's got a lot of bulk to back that up. Not a ton of pivot options to get into his bulk, so he's going to have to hard switch in instead of being able to deal some damage and take a hit. Um, but I think it can be okay. Regice is technically an Aurora Veil setter, so he can manually set up his Hail, or if he's up against a Hail team, he can set Aurora Veil if he wanted to as well. Regice is it's a pretty solid tier 5 pick. I think that it's one of the better tier 5s. It's a little bit ridiculous that it's in tier 5, but it's just not really good enough for tier 4 as an ice type because it has so many weaknesses anyways. Um, a big thing on against this team that we'll talk about a little bit later is that he doesn't really have fire resists. His fire resists are Latios and Mega Sharpedo, which neither of them really want to take fire attacks. So we'll maybe see if he wants to patch that up in free agency or something like that. Again, fire is a really good typing against this team at this point, so that's sort of where we're at. So now we'll head into the strengths and weaknesses part, and we'll sort of talk about fire a little bit more. So major resist, this seems to be common so far, is that a lot of people are having tons of grass resists and bug resists. He has 5 grass resists, 2 of those being 4 times resists, and he has 5 bug resists, 1 of those being a 4 times resist. He has 5 fighting resists as well, 1 of those being an immunity in his ghost type, which is Decidueye. So looking pretty solid for him at the moment. Lots of good resistances, especially against fighting. Fighting is kind of a really good offensive type. Grass isn't a great offensive type, but I don't think Grass is going to have a ton of success this season just after looking through the resistances pages on everyone's team pages. Bug, same thing. I don't think it's going to be that great of an offensive type this season. In terms of major weaknesses, you'll notice there's more major weaknesses than resists. He does have a few really good resists as well that I failed to put on the slide deck, but Steel is another big one for him. He's got 4 Steel resists and only 2 weaknesses to it. Fire, he has 3 weaknesses and 2 resists. The problem is is that his 2 resists don't tank fire hits very well. So that's why I think that fire is a really good offensive type against his team. Flying, he has 3 weaknesses and 2 resists to flying. His flying resists are Skarmory and Electros. Skarmory, I could see tanking a flying hit. Electros, maybe not so much. The problem with that is that Electros doesn't have the recovery to tank flying hits over and over and over again. Ice, he has 3 weaknesses, 3 resists, so it sort of balances out. Um, Unfortunately, some of his really good offensive threats like Latios, potentially Decidueye, those are weak to ice. One of his resists is Regice, which still doesn't want to take physical ice hits, just because ice isn't a great defensive typing. And he's actually got 3 fairy weaknesses as well, along with 3 fairy resists. Um, I think Fairy could be sort of a downfall of this team potentially. Like his switch-ins to Fairy are like Volcarona and Skarmory and Weezing. So Skarmory and Weezing are really good Fairy resists, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if he wants to be put in the position where he has to bring one of those to cover for Mega Sharpedo and Latios every game. So we'll sort of see how he works around those. So now we'll talk about his hazard game. He has 3 hazard setters, my bad. Skarmory with Stealth Rocks and Spikes, Donphan with Stealth Rocks, and Weezing with Toxic Spikes. I'd love to see another Stealth Rock setter, because this kind of forces Skarmory or Donphan into running rocks each week. Not that that's the biggest deal, because that's kind of what you expect out of both of them. And he does cover a ton of different hazard options. He's definitely not lacking on the removal side. He has 6 different removers, Latios with Defog, Skarmory with Defog, Volcarona with Defog, Donphan with Rapid Spin, Florges with Defog, and Decidueye with Defog. Lots of Defog. His side is definitely going to be clear of hazards most of his games, which helps out Volcarona a ton. This is something he did really well last season as well. He had Servine, he had Landorus, and Rotom Wash, all that could defog for Volcarona right off the bat. I actually can't remember his entire team exactly, but they definitely supported Volcarona a lot, and that's kind of why Volcarona was at the top of the kill leaderboard last season. So now we'll sort of just look at the summary of his team. So looking at his team again, fire stands out as a big weakness to me. He's got a lot of special bulk on his team, and he's got some decent physical bulk in the Skarmory and the Donphan. Um, Lacking in fire switch-ins, like I said before, I think I've said that like 3 to 5 times now at this point. And again, it's kind of slow. So you'll notice actually if you look at his overall stats, like the average stats, he's got really balanced attack, defense, special attack, and defense. All of those are in the 90s for averages. And then he has an average speed of 71, which I think is a little bit too slow for this league. Lots of teams are drafting really fast teams. And so I think he's going to rely on Sharpedo speed boosting quite a bit, and Volcarona setting up a Quiver Dance, Donphan setting up a Rock Polish, Regice setting up a Rock Polish, all of those things, and Latios maybe being scarfed quite a bit as well for his speed to sort of catch up. Otherwise, he'll have to run a lot of bulk and be able to tank hits, bring Florges to quite a few games, be able to wish past to things. I think that's what it's going to be. However, keep in mind this is Matt. He did have the best regular season record last season. He was a semi-finalist, and I know he's a good battler. We all know he's a good battler, so I'm excited to see what he can do with the team. I think it's a really strong team. It definitely looks like something that Matt would draft, which I'm glad about, because I think straying away from sort of a style is maybe not a good thing, but he's keeping to the same style, nice and consistent, just like his battling style is. So I'm excited to see a lot of good things from Matt. Again, I don't think Matt produces any YouTube content. I will follow up on that and sort of find out what's going on with that at some point. It will not be for part of this video, but if I do find out that he does YouTube, then he will be added to the featured channels on the channel. My channel link will be in the description below, and we appreciate you guys coming out and watching all of the NCL YouTube content. Please continue to do so, as well as supporting the NCL in general by doing so. So thank you very much, and I hope you guys have a great day.